We're Deb.
And Doug. And we're very excited that we're able to share with you the ALOHA Way Approach to living life to the fullest with love and service. This is a 5-element approach to figuring out the way that life can be better for you, where you can enjoy it with love and fulfillment throughout the rest of your life. And you can do it in collaboration with other folks as well. But we want to share with you now why it's important to live life to the fullest with love and service.
I think that one of the things that comes to my mind is sometimes when people hear what we have to say, might think, oh, that's a cliche, live life to the fullest with love and service. And that's not what we found. What we found is when you have a choice, when you figure out that you actually have a choice, and when we changed careers, we started having a choice, then you'd say, well, I love what I'm doing, but what about if I have a choice to do something else?
We started to ask questions that maybe we didn't ask before. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely.
Right.
We started asking questions because you're like a kid in a candy store. Once you discover that there's something beyond what you're doing today, and a lot of times people give you advice and you think you're living life to the fullest, but you're not really living life to the fullest, because why are you doing what you're doing today? Do you like it? Well, no. That's the answer I would often get from people. I'd say, because you could tell that they were unhappy or something was going on inside of them. And I would always be pursuing, because I know inside there's something very special about each of us. And the only way, and Doug does it all the time too, and so when we met and got together, we not only learned, we were already doing it with other people, but we learned you could have a relationship that did that as well. And then we had to understand, well, why? And we started asking a lot of questions. In fact, questions kept leading to better questions and better questions, which came in how we developed that unifying standard. And then from there, we could follow, okay, now what? If we don't want to have regrets and we want to make sure that people are not dissatisfied with the way things are,
right,
what would we tell them?
And part of that then became the ALOHA Way Approach. We then began to define for ourselves what was it that we were doing that allowed us to see the life that we were living and understand that it was doing it with love and service. And as we approached it, we then began to discover that these elements were really the key parts of this approach. And so when we talk about those elements, part of that, there's an understanding that we have is that you don't judge yourself right at the beginning. You have to take this approach without judgment. When you do that, you then free yourself to begin to discover some of the other things that are out there for you to begin to think about.
And I think that one of the other things is if it was easy, we would have done it already. And so this is not necessarily easy, but incredibly fulfilling. It's extraordinary how when you finally get it and you understand these elements and how they work together, and we could talk days on every one of these elements.
We won't today.
But we won't today. So we just want you to understand, at least go into the first one that is part of the ALOHA Way, and that's the A, authentic alignment, where you have harmony with yourself and your values.
There is a Hawaiian word called pono, and that Hawaiian word means to be centered, to feel like things are right in your life. There's also a Chinese word called chi that folks may be familiar with, and that means to be centered in your core. And so when we think about authentic alignment, we think about ourselves being aligned and centered in your core. And to really get into this approach, you have to have that alignment initially. Because the rest of the approach depends on you individually understand what that centered part of you feels like. And it's not just what you think it is, it's also how you feel, it's also your spirit, how your body works with you. All of these are part and parcel of understanding how you are centered and aligned for yourself. And the authentic piece of this, the reason that we call it authentic alignment, is because it needs to feel right for you. You can think that you're aligned, you can do all the things that are part of a control paradigm about being aligned, but if it doesn't feel right, then it's not authentic to you. And that's the authentic piece of authentic alignment.
And the harmony within yourself is something that's very special, because when you're not in harmony, everybody knows it. everybody knows how it affects you and the tasks that you're ever trying to do or the connections you're trying to make. And so we found 3 pieces.
Well, I was going to say that actually I'm very proud of Deb because this is something that she developed a long time ago, actually, to describe being centered in a particular way. And so, why don't you tell them?
Right, you're trying to optimize. We're always trying to say we want to be centered, we want to come from strength. And I found out that it was attitude, behavior, and standards. Because if you have the right attitude and it's aligned with what your behaviors are and your standards for how you're going to do that and live your life with each choice you make every day, when they're in harmony, that's great. When they overlap, that's great. But when there are gaps or disconnects,
Or even frictions.
and friction, yes. But they're always changing, see? Our attitudes change every day. And that's kind of the tough part.
But what doesn't necessarily change, or if it changes over time slowly, are our values.
Yes.
And values are an incredibly important piece of this. And they're related to standards because values provide the foundation on which we base our own standards. Our standards for determining whether or not our attitudes and behaviors are what we want them to be. Are we aligned with, our attitudes and behaviors aligned with our standards and our values?
Right. And I would say that just to add to what you have, is to say that if you align up the attitude, behavior, standards, you're going to strengthen your core of who you are as a person so that when obstacles come on in your path, that's not going to be as problematic as they may have been in the past. And you're going to reach out and be able to do far more when you have these aligned.
As a matter of fact, when you're aligned, it's not just about getting through obstacles that are placed in front of you. It's also being able to discover that there are new opportunities out there for you. When you are authentically aligned, the world begins to open up for you in ways, and we can't wait to talk to you about that next element, loving connections, that's going to allow you to discover that authentic alignment then leads into relationships that are also aligned. And so, this is Deb and Doug saying, Aloha!